Okay, cost of good manufactured. How we can get it? Obviously, if we have question like this for the cost of good manufactured, if you have question like this, which you're gonna have it on your midterm, you're gonna have something similar like this. The easier thing that you can do is to copy the question. All right, from the McGraw here, you can copy it, and then you can move to Excel spreadsheet. So once you're on the Excel spreadsheet, you can paste it. And everything's gonna fall. Now you have to do a little bit formatting, but that's not, that shouldn't be issue for you. Since you're a generation that dealing with the technology, that shouldn't be a problem for you. The only thing you have to do some alignments, so the alignments can be on the right track. Then you can expand this thing. And you're gonna have all the information that you need on one single page. And the first thing that you require is prepare schedule cost of goods manufactured. Now, what do you have to remember is you have to go to the Excel spreadsheet that we did in the class. And you to understand that the cost of goods manufactured coming from which account? So we have three accounts, inventory accounts, raw material, work in process, finished goods. From which account cost of goods manufactured comes from? Do you remember? That will be from work in process. From that account, the credit on work in process, your cost of goods manufactured. Now, in order to, so for that reason, you have to go through those Excel spreadsheet that I'm giving you. I believe I sent you email with that Excel spreadsheet. Let me double check on that one. Yes, I did send you that Excel spreadsheet with the calculation. So you have it. So check that calculation, that Excel spreadsheet with the calculation. There you can find how exactly cost of goods manufactured is calculated. It's coming from the work in process account. Once you know that, then you can start working. So what you have to do for the cost of goods manufactured?
Beginning balance, and then you add direct materials, direct labor.
So we need the direct material, direct labor,
manufacturing
overhead. So technically what you have to do is, let me share my screen again. From the Excel spreadsheet that we prepare in the class, you have to prepare something like this to get the cost of goods manufactured. In order to get the cost of goods manufactured, first we have to get the direct material used. Once you get the material used, you're going to have direct labor, manufacturing overhead, and then you're going to have production cost. We're going to add the beginning balance and then deduct the ending balance. You're going to get cost of goods manufactured. So let's start now. Let's do it together quickly. So at least you know how this one is done. Let me again open the Excel spreadsheet. So let's start one at the beginning. So we're going to have direct material. Then we're going to have purchases. Actually, that will be the first one, will be the direct material, raw material inventory, beginning balance. Then we're going to have the purchases. Then we're going to have raw material available. And then we're going to deduct the ending balance, raw material ending balance. And we're going to have raw material used. We're going to have the first number, raw material used. Once we get the raw material used, what we're going to do, we're going to add direct labor. We're going to add direct labor. Now here for the manufacturing overhead, that's a little bit tricky now because we have so many things here. So what we use so far, we use the purchase material. This one is used. We use the direct raw material beginning inventory, that one's gone. Raw material ending inventory, that one's gone. Now we have to see which one are the next. So the next one is direct labor. Direct labor is next on the line. Where is it? This one. So we use the direct labor. That one is used. So the next thing that we have to do is manufacture overhead. Now for the manufacturing overhead, we're going to have a different thing. So what we have to do, all the costs related to the factory. So manufacturing overhead will be the depreciation. If we start line by line, that will be depreciation will be the first one. Insurance factory, second one. Then we're going to have maintenance factory. Third one, administration expense, that will be go somewhere else, that's not related. Sales of sales, that's not a cost. We're chasing cost here. Utilities factory will be another one. Supplies factory will be another one for us. Selling expenses, that's not part of this. Administrative expenses, that's again not part of it. And indirect labor factory, that's something that we can use. So all the red one, or the one is kind of reddish kind of color, all those are manufacturing overhead. So I'm going to copy this here. That will be part of manufacturing overhead. Then I'm going to get this one, this one, this one, and this one. That's manufacturing overhead for me. Boom, I have my manufacturing overhead. Once you get the manufacturing overhead, the next thing that we have to do is to add, we're going to get the total overhead cost. Once we get the total overhead cost, total manufacturing overhead cost. Once we get that cost, then the next thing that we have to do is to, there will be a line here, total manufacturing cost, which total manufacturing cost, now we're going to include any number that we have here, any number that we have here, and any number that we have here. Those three numbers will be included in the next line, which will be that will be total overhead cost first, total manufacturing overhead cost, and the next one will be total manufacturing cost. Once we combine the direct material, direct labor, and overhead, that's going to give us a total manufacturing cost. Now, to convert that total manufacturing cost into the cost of goods sold, now what we have to do, we have to add the beginning balance manufacturing overhead, and that will give us a total available to transfer. You don't even have to put the name here. And the last thing that we have to do is deduct less. You're going to have here calculation. And then the next thing that you have to do is less ending balance of the manufacturer overhead account. And you're going to get that the last one will be cost of goods manufactured. And that's how you get the cost of goods manufactured. That will be your schedule. Now, once you have the cost of goods manufactured, the next question will be you to prepare the income statement. Now, the income statement, if you have to prepare the income statement, now for the income statement, you have to start with sales. Then you have to get the cost of goods sold. First, you have to prepare, now we're going to start with sales. Then you have to get the cost of goods sold. How are you going to get cost of goods sold? Well, that will be kind of simple, since you have the cost of goods sold. Since you have your manufacturing overhead, next thing that you need, so we use the sales. Sales are used. It's very important for you to mark what you use, what is left. So at this point, you can see how many things left. So we use the work in process beginning balance. We use that one. We use the work in process ending balance. So not many left for us to use now. We still have to use these administrative expenses. That should be no few here. And utility factory selling expenses, that shouldn't be highlighted as well. So those are the ones that left for us: administrative expenses, selling expenses, advertising expenses, finished goods beginning, finished goods ending balance. Those ones that are left for us. So what we're going to do, we're going to start using them. Cost of goods sold, how are we going to get it? We're going to get beginning balance on the finished goods. Then we're going to get cost of goods manufactured. That's going to give you finished goods available. Then we're going to deduct the ending balance of the finished goods. And we're going to have cost of goods sold. So we're going to have sales here. We're going to have cost of goods sold. And the next thing that we're going to have is the gross margin. That will be the traditional income statement, gross margin. Once we get the gross margin, then we're going to have operating expense. Operating expense will be, so we use those two here, beginning and ending, those already used. The last thing that left is administrative, selling and advertising. We're going to copy those one. I'm going to push that right here, and that should do our job. Operating expense, we have the total operating expense. Operating expense. And then we're going to have our net income. So that will be here calculation. And the last one will be here net calculation. Net income, or you can call it operating income, depends on the what kind of available options. Here will be operating income. Operating income is here. That will be the income statement. So basically, the challenge here, it might be from the only challenge that you may have is from the manufacturer overhead cost. Because the manufacturer overhead is not single line, it's the different costs that are given to you. So you have to realize you have to use all of those to get to the point to get the total manufacturing cost. Otherwise, everything ends to the point that you have to simply use this Excel spreadsheet, which I already sent you as in your email from last week, if you remember. That's why please monitor your email. Everything that I send you is you can use it. You can literally use it for the questions that you have to prepare. Only thing is you have to plug the knowledge here. Basically here you have the cost of goods manufactured, starting with the direct material, going with the direct labor manufacture overhead, production cost, and beginning balance, ending balance, and get the cost of goods manufactured. And after that, you have the operating income as well. So what was the tricky part? To get the cost of goods sold. How are you going to get it? With the finished goods. Beginning balance, add the cost of goods manufactured, available for sale, less cost of goods sold. Get the gross margin. After that, get the operating income, operating expenses, and you're getting the operating income. That was the thing that you had to do in your assignment. I know it sounds very easy when I'm doing it. I know, I agree with you, but again, try to use the Excel spreadsheets that I'm giving you and which are posted for you on Moodle. Those are there for a reason. So please try to use those ones. It's very important for me to you to know that you can use those Excel spreadsheets and in your assignments. The other thing that I would strongly suggest you is every time when you're having assignments, you can literally copy and paste it the way I show you from McGraw-Hill. Stay on the Excel spreadsheet. Do the calculation in the Excel spreadsheet. Then move to the McGraw-Hill and plug the numbers. In Excel spreadsheet, you can use the formula. You can use everything. Everything is available for you. So use those one. It's a way easy. Today, that was very good. Any questions? Everybody understand this?
Yes, Prof.
Yes? Everybody comfortable now with this cost of goods manufactured and preparation of the income statement from the information that was given to you? Everybody comfortable now? Daniela, is that help? Daniela, you asked me the question, right? Daniela? Okay. So just looking for your confirmation that you're comfortable with this or can move on. Yes, no? Tell me something, people. Yes?
Yes, Prof.
Yes, Prof.
Okay. So once you say yes, I'm gonna move on. Until you're not saying yes, I'm gonna start keep going, trying to make sure that you're getting everything that you need in order to be successful in this course. That's the objective. That's my objective. Your objective should be you to get all the questions answered. So now let's go with today's chapter. Today's chapter, if you remember what we're gonna do, what we did last time is we did some calculation, and I showed the last thing that we finished last time was with the two formats of the income statement that you can find in the one day when you become a manager. So there will be a traditional income statement, again start with sales, cost of goods sold, gross margin, the way that we did it. Then we're going to have operating expenses, and the last one will be operating income. And that's called traditional income statement, because all the statements for all the manufacturing, non-manufacturing company are prepared this way. So you want to see how much you're getting from the sales, but you want to directly to see how much is the cost for that particular sales. And that's how you get in the gross margin. So basically, this is the cost of this is the cost of your operation. Those are your sales, cost of the operation, and you make sure that you're making money. Now, the next thing is the operating expenses, which are purely business expenses. So what we can see from here, operating income is your profit, correct? So the profit is, in this case, we're going to be sales minus all the expenses, correct? So in terms of if the sales are high enough to cover the expenses, we're going to make money. But if the operating expenses jump to $600, we're having a problem, right? Because the sales are not enough to cover our cost, which is cost of goods sold and operating expenses. So as long as those two are below 1,000, we're making money. Make sense? So now let's move to the other one. How much we have to do here? 200. Let's move this one today. Now let's move to the contribution income statement, and we're going to stay this today. We're going to stay only on the contribution income statement. So contribution income statement, how will be different than traditional? We're going to pull cost of goods sold and operating expenses, and we're going to see how they behave. And we're going to put them only on the way they behave. And they can behave only two ways: for simplicity. And to make it easy for ourselves, we're going to split. We're going to look at those costs and we're going to identify, and we're going to give them only two options. They can either behave as a variable, either as a fixed cost. There's no other options here. Okay, so once we do that, we're going to come up with this contribution format income statement, which statement is going to start with the sales, variable cost. Once we have the sales and variable cost, we're going to have cost of goods, contribution margin. Then we're going to deduct the fixed costs and we're going to have the operating expenses. Now, what was the interesting with the variable cost? Variable cost, if we use it, we have to pay for it. If we don't use it, we don't have to pay for it. That's why it's important now you to recall everything that we cover from the chapter 3. Variable cost per unit stays the same. In total, goes up. So now, if we're doing sales, if we're selling, let's say we are in the merchandising company. Let's say we're in the merchandising company. We're buying a laptop for $1,000. And we're selling the same laptop for $1,200. So the sales are driven by the laptops, but the costs are also driven by the laptops. More we're selling, more we're getting. But more we're selling, more cost we have to have. Make sense? So in that case, the sales and the cost are driven only and only by the number of units that we're selling. In order to sell it, we have to purchase it. That's why it's driven by the sales. Now, the fixed cost will be our, let's say, the rent of the space. So that cost always going to stay the same. Make sense? Are you guys with me? Are you following my logic?
Yeah.
Because today, what we're going to do is we're going to start working on this, but I'm going to start a new Excel spreadsheet so I can post a different Excel spreadsheet for you. I'm going to close this one for a moment. And I'm going to open completely new Excel spreadsheet. And I'm going to post all this information that we just get right here. Let's do some formatting. Can you guys see my screen? Yes, you can. Right? So we're going to build on the contribution income statement format only. But before we do that, let's do some adjustments here and do some calculations. We already said that here we're going to have our first calculation, and here will be our second calculation. First calculation is going to be equal to 1000 minus 600, and the second calculation will be equal to operating expense will be equal to the contribution margin minus the fixed cost. We're going to have our operating income. Now, what we can see from here, we can see that our profit, let's do some formulas first. We can see that our profit or operating income, how are we going to get my profit? If I want to calculate my profit, how did I get the profit? Sales minus total cost, correct? Make sense? Are you guys with me?
Yeah.
Okay. But what we can see here that the total cost is equal to what? Which costs are included in the total cost? We have the variable cost
And fixed cost.
and we have a fixed cost. That's our total cost. So our profit will be equal to sales minus, in bracket we can say variable cost, plus the fixed cost. So as long as we cover our cost and sales are more than the cost, we're going to generate profit. Make sense? So when you open the company, no, what's going to happen when you open the company? When you open the company, obviously, why people open the company? Why do people start their own business?
To gain profit from.
To get the profit. How are they going to get the profit? If the sales are more than the cost. That's how simple it is. As long as the sales are more than the cost, people are going to make profit. If the sales are less than the cost, obviously people are going to lose money. I'm sorry. So now, for that reason, when you open the new business, brand new business, first objective is what? To cover your cost. That should be your first objective. So what's going to happen? Let's go to the point that we can see that profit is equal to 0. If profit is equal to 0, what that means?
Break even.
Break even. In other words, the sales, if the profit is 0, let's move here, because this one become now interesting part. When the profit is 0, that means the sales are equal to variable cost plus
Cost.
plus fixed cost. We cover our cost, correct? Or we can say, or let's, that will be one expression, or we can do this. We can do the, or we can say the 0 0 is equal to, what will be 0 equal now? If I only want to do, if I move the cells on the other side, is cells minus variable cost and minus fixed cost, correct? That will be the other way to express it. Are you guys with me?
Yes, Prof.
Now,
Prof.
let's see how we go calculate the contribution margin. How did we get the contribution margin?
Sales minus variable cost.
Sales minus variable cost. Now, the question is, do we have sales minus variable cost in this formula?
Yes.
Yes. Can I substitute it?
Yes.
So if I do that, what's going to happen? It's going to have 0 to be equal to
Contribution margin.
contribution margin minus the fixed cost. Is that true? So let's play with the numbers here. We want this one to be 0. So if my fixed costs are $400, my operating income will be 0, correct?
Yes, Prof.
What that means? That means that my contribution margin is equal to the fixed cost.
Yes, Prof.
But contribution margin comes from sales minus the variable cost. Correct?
That's right, Prof.
Okay. So if we want to be on the break even, means that our contribution margin has to be equal to the fixed cost. That's how we're going to get the break even. Makes sense, right?
Yes, Prof.
Okay, so now let's go, once we know this, let's play a little bit with this calculation here. And we're going to come up with some different, let's make it more realistic. Let's go per unit. What do we know on per unit? Sales always going to be, say, the same per unit. Variable cost per unit is going to stay the same. How about the fixed cost? Where the fixed cost is going to stay the same? Which fixed going to stay the same? Per unit or in total? What you going to? Total. So let's go per unit. Let's stay per unit. Let's say our sales price is $100. Our variable cost is $60. Our contribution margin is $40. Let's increase our fixed cost, our rent. Let's say our rent is $3,000. So if we're selling only one unit, obviously that's not going to be enough. We're going to lose in money. How much are we losing? Exactly $2,960. Make sense? So selling only one unit is not going to help us. Now the question here is how many units we need to sell in order at least to get to the break even. Means our contribution margin here to be equal to the fixed cost. Because as long as my contribution margin is equal to the fixed cost, then I'm going to be 0 here. Before we do that, let's do something else. Let's see what's the percentage here. Because per unit, it can be cost, it can be percentage, correct? Now, we already know from the previous accounting, from the basic accounting course, that sales are always 100%, correct? Now, let's try to express the variable cost as a percentage of sales. How much will be the variable cost as a percentage of sales now? How are we going to get it? Obviously, that will be equal to the variable cost divided by the sales. And we're going to see that our variable cost percentage is 60%. What's left to be for the contribution margin? Well, if the sales are equal to the variable cost plus contribution margin, obviously those variable costs and contribution margin should give us 100%. So in this case, we can calculate 100 minus 60 or 40 divided by contribution margin divided by sales, and we're going to see the same number, 40%. Make sense? Are you guys with me?
Yes, Prof.
So this is only and only when we sell only one unit. We're selling here only one unit. Let's see what's going to happen if we sell 2 units. How will be our calculation here if magically we sell 2 units? If I sell 2 units, now how much will be my sales?
200,
200. How much will be my variable cost?
120,
120. How much will be my contribution margin?
80.
80. Fixed cost?
Remains 3,000.
Remain the same. Operating income? Now operating income
Also.
changes. What's the change in operating income?
40,
How much is it?
40.
$40. Change in operating income is $40. It's going to be this one minus that one, right? So how much is that? It's going to be $40. Let's make it positive. So my operating income start climbing up with $40. The question is, from where those $40 came from?
Sale of another unit.
From sale of another unit. Why? Because every unit that I'm selling is going to give me $40 contribution margin. Or in other words, that change in the operating income came from the contribution margin of additional units that we're selling. Does that make sense?
Yes, Prof.
So now the next question will be very simple. What if I sell 4 units? How much will be my contribution margin now? Can you predict?
160.
160. How did you get it? 4 times 140. Correct? Are you guys with me?
Yes, Professor.
Okay, so now you become like artificial intelligence. The only thing that I have to tell you is how many units I'm selling, and you can right away tell me the contribution margin. Now you can predict the contribution margin, correct? So let's not stay with 4 units. Let's go higher. Let's go 10 units now. If I sell 10 units, how much will be my sales?
1,000.
1,000.
That will be 1,000 now. That will be equal to 10 times 100. That will be 1,000. How about my variable cost?
100.
It's going to be equal to 10 times 60, 600. Contribution margin will be 400, correct?
Yeah.
And that's still not enough to cover my fixed cost. Operating income will be negative $2,600. Now, this is also dollars amount. Let's see the percentages. Sales always going to be 100%. That's not going to change. Now, where is the variable cost? As a percentage. 600 divided by 1,000, it's going to be 60%. How about contribution margin?
40.
Still 40. It's going to be equal to 400 divided by 1000. This one should be equal to 400 divided by 1000, or still 40%. So, what that means? Can you see something? When I'm selling 1 unit, my contribution margin is 40%. When I'm selling 2 units, my contribution margin is 40%. When I'm selling 10 units, my contribution margin is 40%. So now the question is, what will be my contribution margin if I'm selling 2,343 units as a percentage?
Still 40%.
Still 40%. So regardless how many units I'm gonna selling, percentage is not gonna change. What else is not gonna change? Contribution margin per unit. Why? Because the sales price always gonna stay the same and the variable cost always gonna stay the same. So once we know that the sales price is gonna stay the same and the variable cost gonna stay the same, that automatically means that contribution margin always gonna stay the same per unit. As a percentage per unit and always gonna stay the same. In total, always gonna stay the same. The percentage never gonna change. Well, that's gonna help us, isn't it? So now, once we know the first objective is to get the company to the break even, now we can work on this one and see, in order to get the break even, we need to find 2 numbers. What will be the number of units that we need to sell? First question. And the second question, how much should be my total sales in order to get to the break even? First, let's find the number of units that we need to sell in order to get to the break even. How are we going to find those units? Well, very simple. We have to go back to our formulas and we have to do some tricks there. What will be the tricks? I'm going to show you just in a second. First thing that we have to do is go to the original formula and remind ourselves how we get the formula on the break-even. So we know that the sales minus variable cost minus fixed cost is going to give us profit. Correct?
Correct.
Now, what else we know? We know the sales, total sales, are equal to the units that we're selling, number of units, time,
The price.
price per unit. Make sense?
Yes, Prof.
How about the variable cost? Will be variable
Number of
cost per
units.
number of units
Times the cost per unit.
time variable cost per unit. All right. So that will be the sales price per unit here, and that will be the variable cost per unit here. Okay, so, but we also know that contribution margin is equal to what?
And minus variable cost.
Sales minus variable cost. But sales are number of units times sales, and the variable cost is number of units times the variable cost per unit. Make sense?
Yes,
So
Prof.
how are we going to get the contribution margin then? Contribution margin will be the sales per unit cost per unit, sales per unit, time number of units, minus, if we put this in brackets, otherwise the formula is not gonna work, minus variable cost per unit
times number of units.
time number of units. Is there anything common between those two numbers?
Number of units.
Number of units. Can I take it out of the brackets? I should be, right? So contribution margin will be equal to number of units time, in brackets I'm going to have sales price per unit minus variable cost per unit. Make sense? But then if I have sales per unit and variable costs per unit, what's that going to give me?
Contribution margin.
Per unit, right? So my contribution margin in this case will be equal to what? Number of the units time contribution margin per unit. Let's see if that's true. Here my contribution margin is 80. Why? Because my contribution margin is 40 and I'm selling 2 units. Here my contribution margin is 400. Why? Because my contribution margin per unit is 40 and I'm selling 10 units. So this one makes sense. So now, if I know this, how much my contribution margin, what do I need? I need my contribution margin to be equal to the fixed cost in order to be a break even. So if I substitute this in this formula, what I'm going to get? I'm going to get the number of units that I need to sell time contribution margin per unit should be equal to fixed cost. And only in that case, my operating income will be 0, or I'm going to be in break even. What was the first question that we asked? How many units we need to sell? Can I find out now how many units I need to sell?
Yes, Prof.
Number of units will be how much?
Fixed cost divided by
Fixed cost divided by contribution margin per unit. And you can say, okay, that sounds very interesting as a formula, but the question is this actually works? That's a very nice explanation of the formula, teacher. Good job, but we don't believe you, right? You can say that. So the only way we to find out is this true is actually we to use it in the formula, correct? Let's plug it in the formula and let's see what's going to happen now. Once I'm selling one unit, I have contribution margin per unit. Am I? The next thing that I need is the fixed cost. So how many things I need? I need my fixed cost. If I'm using this formula, I need the fixed cost and I need contribution margin per unit. Do I have those one?
Yeah.
How much is my fixed cost? Well, my fixed cost is 3,000. How much is my contribution margin per unit? $40. So how many units I need to sell to get the break even?
5.
Well, that will be this one divided by 40. So I need to sell 75 units. If I sell 75 units, my operating income should be 0. Let's see if that's true. Let's eliminate those one. Let's start from scratch. So we can actually see this one. So If I put here 75, then how much will be my sales? 100 times 75. 7,500. How much will be my variable cost? 60 times 75, right? 4,500. What was my objective? To get contribution margin, which is equal to the fixed cost. Fixed cost is 3,000. They're not going to change. So what I need here, I need 3,000. Did I get it? 7,500 minus 4,500. I get 3,000. So my operating income is 0. What that tells us? That tells us that this formula works. So that means is how are we going to get the number of units? We're going to get the number of units when we have the fixed cost divided by contribution margin per unit. Do you want to see the practical application of this formula? Do you want me to show you the practical application of this formula?
Yes, Prof, please.
Prof.
Sure. Now, the question is, how many of you are working? Is there any one of you who are working?
Yes.
Of those who are working, how many of you paying rent?
Probably everybody.
Probably everybody. Then, let's pretend for a second that the fixed cost is your rent, which is actually true, correct? And then let's pretend for a second that the contribution margin is your hourly rate. Now the question is, how much your rent? How much you paying for rent? Just give me a random number.
2,000.
2,000. Now, how much your rate? How much they paying you per hour? Again, random number.
25.
Sorry? I didn't get that one.
Right.
Sorry? Give me
Mine
some
is
number.
$18.
Sorry? $20?
Yeah,
18, 20? Which one?
mine is $18.
$18. $18. So the question is, once we have those numbers, the simple question is, how many hours I need to work in order to pay my rent? Make sense? So the question is, how many hours to cover my rent? Can you tell me?
112.
So the number of hours will be equal to what?
Your rent
Fixed
divided
cost.
by.
Yes, rent divided by the rate.
Great.
Or fixed cost divided by contribution margin, which we say contribution margin in this case is the rate. So how many hours we need to work?
112.
In this rate, you need to work 2,000 divided by 18. 112 hours. So how many hours you work per day? How many hours you working per day?
8 hours.
8 hours. If you're working 8 hours per day, how many days? Number of days?
14.
14 working days. So if you work, once you finished on the 14th day of work, when they pay you $18, you're gonna generate $2,000, which will be enough to cover your rent. That's your practical application of this. So what's your opportunity? How can I reduce the number of days?
Over time.
That will be increase the hours, right? Hours that you're working, but you're limited on the hours working. You're international student, so you have 24 hours working. So what's the other option?
Find a job that pays more.
Find a job that pays more. So what's gonna
Or find-
happen? So this is if the rate is $18. Let's see what's gonna happen if that rate changes. So let's change this rate to how much we're gonna change it here. Let's go to $20. If you get paid $20, then you need only 12 and a half days. Or only 100 hours. So you're 11 hours less than before. The other option is you to find lower
the
rent.
place that's cheaper.
If you pay $1,500, for example, now you need to work only 9 days and a half to cover your rent. So this is your actual application of you to do this calculation. And now the opportunity here, either the rent going down or either the rate goes up. If the rate goes up, since the rate is denominator here, the number is going to go down. If the fixed cost goes down, the number of hours is going to go down. There's another application of this one. How many of you paying for the Compass card? Is there anyone who?
Yes.
Yes.
Mostly Prof.
How much is the 2 zones Compass card? Compass monthly pass. How much is it?
2 zones
143.
is 143.
143.
50
Now,
cents.
that's a two zone Compass monthly pass. How much is a single ticket for 2 zones?
$4.65.
$4?
Oh,
60.
if you're using Compass, it's $3.85.
No. Single ticket. Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Let's use the
$3.85.
Compass. 3.85. 85. So what that means? Number of the trips. How many trips you need to make with your Compass card monthly pass in order to justify the cost of the monthly pass. That will be 143 divided by 385. So as long as you're making 37 trips using the SkyTrain 37 times per month, you're not losing money. Do you understand this?
Yes, professor.
So as long as you jump on the SkyTrain 37 times, 37, or let's say 38, let's go to 38. 38 times 385, that means you spend more money, more than 143, then in that case, yes, it makes sense you to pay the monthly pass. But if you're not using the SkyTrain per month at least 37 times, then it doesn't make sense you to pay for the monthly pass. Why? Because by paying monthly pass, you're not using that monthly pass enough to justify the cost. How can you do that? Well, you go to your account and see how many trips you're making per month. And if you're counting 35 trips, you're wasting your money. But if you're using the Compass card at least 38 times, that means you're justifying the cost of the fixed cost. That's how you can make the fixed cost works for you. Now, if you're using the Compass card 50 times, that means how much will be now cost per trip for you. Let's do that calculation. Now, the other thing is, the flip side is, if I'm using the Compass card, let's put it here right below, and if I'm using my Compass card 50 times, how much will be your cost per one trip? Divided by 50, your cost will be 286. So now that justify of usage of the Compass card, because you're way below the single ticket. You're $1 under the single ticket. So if you have to pay the single ticket, you're going to end up paying $50 more. So yes, you're saving. In this case, you're saving. But any other cases, if you not use at least 37 times, that means you're losing money. That's not a practical application of this. So now we found the number of units. What was the next objective? To find the total sales. How are we going to get the total sales? Well, again, we're going to start with the break even. So we already found the number of units. How are we going to express the number of units? Let's move down here. And let's say number of units, we already found it. The number of units should be equal to fixed cost divided by contribution margin per unit. And that was the first formula that we come up today. So now let's see how much should be my total sales in order to cover my fixed cost. Starting point here for the formula will be contribution margin to be equal to the fixed cost. We already know that. Now, if I do contribution margin, equal to fixed cost time 1. Did I change the formula? What do you say?
No, prof.
No, I haven't changed the formula, correct?
Yes.
That means I can do the fixed cost is equal to the contribution margin time 1. I still haven't changed the formula, correct?
Yes.
But can I say that 1 is equal to sales divided by sales?
Yes, prof.
Yes. So if I substitute 1 in the first formula, what I'm going to have? I'm going to have fixed cost to be equal to contribution margin time sales divided by sales. Correct? The question is, did I change the formula?
No, you didn't, prof.
No, I haven't changed the formula. So, but now let's see what's happening here. Now what I have is, I have the fixed cost to be equal to sales time sales divided by, no, that will be contribution margin divided by sales. Correct? Are you guys with me?
Yes, Professor.
So, but contribution margin divided by sales, what that's going to give us? Here, remember, how we going to get those? How did we get those 40%? We divided contribution margin divided by sales, correct? So that means in this formula, contribution margin divided by sales is going to give us contribution margin ratio. So now what I have here, I have fixed cost to be equal to sales time contribution margin ratio. How much should be sales now? Can I express sales only? What will be my formula for sales? Sales should be equal to
What divided by contribution?
fixed cost
margin.
divided by contribution margin ratio. What do we know about the contribution margin ratio? It never changes. That was the beauty of the contribution margin ratio, because the contribution margin ratio, once we see here, it never changes. It always stays the same, 40, 40, 40, 40, 40%. So let's apply this to the formula. You can say, okay, that's a very nice formula, but we don't believe you, which is fair to comment. So let's try to plug this formula and see if this formula actually is going to work. So again, our formula is sales to be equal to the fixed cost divided by contribution margin ratio. The question is, do I know my fixed cost?
3,000.
3,000. Do I know my contribution margin ratio?
40%.
40%. So what do I need here? Let's get rid of this information. I know my fixed cost is 3,000. I know my contribution margin is 40%, correct? So how much should be my sales? If that's the formula, sales should be equal to 3,000 divided by 40%, or it's going to be 7,500. So if I plug here 7,500, from those 7,500, only 40% comes to the contribution margin. This one time 40%. Is that going to be enough to cover my fixed cost? As you can see, it's more than enough. So that's the next application of this formula. You to find out the sales based only on the fixed cost and the contribution margin ratio, by knowing that this contribution margin ratio comes from the sales. So we have two formulas here for the break-even. And the two formulas for the break-even are number of units that we need to sell and total sales. So the total sales will be equal to the fixed cost divided by contribution margin ratio. Those are your two powerful formulas to find the break-even, as a number of units and the total sales. What's interesting in those formulas? Numerator is always fixed cost. as you can see, numerator is always fixed cost. You need fixed cost in both formulas. But here you need, in both formulas, you need contribution margin as well, but different level. Here you need contribution margin per unit, where here you need contribution margin ratio. Make sense? Once you get those two, you can find everything. Now you see the contribution margin ratio, you can get it different ways because the contribution margin ratio doesn't change regardless number of units. So always when you get the contribution margin divided by sales, it's going to give you contribution margin ratio. Where the contribution margin per unit, you have to go to the unit level and find out how much the contribution margin. Now, this one is the first. So let's see another thing what we can do with this with these formulas. Per unit, we're selling one. We already say if we sell 75 units, right? If we sell 75 units, we'll be at break even. Remember? So that means that 75 times 100. What I'm doing, I'm not sure what I'm doing here. Let's go back to the formula. 75 times 100 is going to give you 7,500, and then we're going to have 75 times 60 is going to give us 4,000, so we're at break even. The question is, do you want to stay at break even?
No.
No. What do you want?
Profit.
Profit. How much profit do you want? This is the only question that we have to ask ourselves. And I'm asking, how much profit do you want? How much operating income you want? Give me some number, random numbers from up to 50,000.
50,000, bro.
50,000. So, if that's the case, and how we get the number of units? The formula for the number of units, if you remember, is equal to fixed cost divided by contribution margin per unit, right? So if you want, let's say our profit target, operating income, you said you want to be 50,000. How are we going to get it? Very simple. Add it to the fixed cost. So, and modify the formula. So what will be that? Number of units, in this case, should be equal to fixed cost plus 50,000 that you want divided by contribution margin per unit. So do I know my fixed cost?
Yes, 3,000.
Do I know my
Target.
contribution margin per unit?
40.
$40. Do I know how much I want? I want 50,000. I mean, you wanted 50,000. So, can we get the numbers? Let's see. Number of units is going to be equal to bracket 3,000 plus, oops, that's not the one that I'm chasing. Let's start again. That will be equal to bracket 3,000 plus what we want, 50, divided by contribution margin per unit, which is $40. So we need to sell 1,325 units, and once we sell 1,305 units, we're going to get the contribution margin that you wanted. Now let's see if that is true. So what we're going to do here, we're going to plug this number equal to 1,325. Now let's see if we're selling 1,325, how much will be our sales? Which will be this one time $100. 132,500. Variable cost is going to be equal to 1,305 times $60, 79,500. Now, how much will be my contribution margin? My contribution margin will be this one minus that one. It's going to be 53,000. So, did we get what we wanted? Did we get 50,000?
Yes, Prof.
Yes. So, what's the tricky part here? If you want to get something, add it to the fixed cost. In your application here with the rent, if you still remember the rent case, so rent is $2,000. Now, if I want to get the rent plus $1,000 cash, what do you have to do? You have to add the $1,000 to the rent and run the calculation. And you're going to see how many hours now you have to need to work to get the rent plus $1,000 cash. So every time when you need the target, this is called the target operating income. If you want the target, you have to add it to the fixed cost. That's to get the number of units. How this going to work with the other formula, with the sales? Well, the same way. Do you want to test the other formula? Shall we test the other formula to make sure the other formula also works?
Yes, Prof, let's go.
Let's test it. Okay. So let's copy this first and paste it here. So the other formula was sales to be equal to fixed cost divided by contribution margin ratio. Now, how much profit you want? Again, 0 to 50. Just choose one number. Give me some number, people. Random number. 1 to 50.
49.
49. Let's go with 49,000. That's what we want. Okay. If you want 49,000, what do we have to do? We have to modify the formula, add it to the sales. So now sales, it's going to be equal to the fixed cost plus 49,000 divided by contribution margin ratio. Obviously, those will be in brackets. Don't forget the brackets in the Excel, otherwise not going to work. So my sales should be equal to 3,000 plus 49 in brackets divided by contribution margin ratio, which is 40%. So I need to sell my sales should be equal to $130,000. If my sales are $130,000, my operating income should be 49. Let's see if that's true. My sales should be equal to 130,000. If my sales are $130,000 and my contribution margin is 40%, as a percentage. So that means contribution margin as a dollars amount is going to be 130 times 40%. My contribution margin will be 52. Fixed costs are 3,000. Did I get operating income that I wanted?
Yes, Prof.
Yes. So now you know how to get the target income. Now the next application of this, all these things, is we know how many we're doing at the break even, right? As a number of units. Let's say in reality, we're selling 750 units. Now that will be two. That's made up number. That's only 10. Let's go 825 units. In reality, we're selling 825. So my sales here will be 100 times 825. And my variable cost is going to be 60 times 825. So in that case, my operating income is $30,000. That's where I am currently, right? As you can see, my contribution margin ratios are the same. They haven't changed. Everything is the same. And I'm making $30,000. So the next thing that we can get from here is our margin of safety. What is margin of safety? Margin of safety is where we are compared to the break-even. Break-even is our 0.0. Now the question is where we are. We are at 825. So the margin of safety can be expressed by the number of units or as a sales. So for the number of units, my margin of safety will be where I am minus break-even. So what that means? That means I'm 7,500 units above the break-even. So the question is, if the next month my sales drop to 650 units, do I have to worry about it?
No,
No.
Prof.
Why? Because I'm still above the break-even. But if my sales reach 100 units, will drop down to 100 units, do I have to worry about it? I'm still above the break-even, but maybe I should start worrying. That's with the number of units. How about the sales? The sales will be 82 where you are minus where the break-even point is. In this case, you are 75,000 above the break-even. So if your sales drop with 100,000 from where you are, do you have to worry about it? No. Why? Because you're still above the break-even. So it's good to know your margin of safety, because that margin of safety always going to tell you how far you are from the break-even point. Farther you are, better for you. But if you see the drop down, then you're going to ask yourself, where is now? Where is margin of safety? Margin of safety can be expressed of the number of units or can be expressed as a percentage. How much will be as a percentage? 750 divided by your current sales. So your margin of safety is, as a percentage, is 91%. And as a dollar amount, should be exactly the same. So that will be how much is margin of safety divided by where you currently are. So that will be equal to this one divided by that number. So as you can see, it's a number of units, and as a sales, it's always the same. 91% is your margin of safety. All right, the last thing that left is the operating leverage. I mean, there are two more things. Operating leverage is one, and the other one is the mix, when you have mix of sales. So let's go with the operating leverage very quickly. Now, if you still remember in the very beginning how we start all the things, we start with the contribution margin income statement. So operating leverage is something that is very interesting, but based on the companies, we can find two types of companies, how the company produce. So we're going to have company, let's say company number one, that will be company number one. And then we're going to have company number two. So let's say the company number one, it's highly depends on the variable cost. Where the company number two highly depend on the fixed cost. What that means? Both company, let's say they start with $10,000 sales. Okay, both company have $10,000 sales. Both company finish with operating income, let's say 1,000. Or let's say $500. Let's make it more dramatic, $500. Both end up with the $500. But inside, they have a different numbers. So what that means? That means is the first company, again, it's highly depends on the variable cost. That means the variable costs are super high. That means, let's say the variable cost in this company is $9,000. Now they're going to generate $1,000 contribution margin, and their fixed cost will be only $500. And then operating income will be 500. Where the other company will be highly depends on the fixed cost. So let's say their variable cost is only $50. Right? Or let's go with the other way. Their variable cost is only $500. But their fixed costs are ginormous. They're $9,000. And their operating income is 500. So let's see what's the percentages here. In this company, the contribution margin is only 10%, where in this company, the contribution margin per unit is 95%. So what that means? That means that this company is going to reach break even with, they have to sell a lot of units in order to get the break even. Where this company, they have to sell very few units to get the break even. But the other thing is, if this company without contribution, with this high contribution margin, one additional sales of units, it's going to bring the huge profit to the company after the break-even point. Where here, that's not going to be the case. Let's make it here more dramatic. Let's go the variable cost here to be $9,300. And $300, so that means the variable fixed cost is only 200. That way. So in this case, one additional unit sales, it doesn't give you too much contribution margin. But this company, since doesn't rely so much on contribution margin per 1 unit. If they lose one sale of the item, if one item is not sold, then their loss is not going to be too much. Where this company, if they not make one additional sale, or if their sales drop with 1 unit, they're going to have a huge impact on their operating income. Now the question is, can we see those companies in reality? Well, we can. Which one will be that? First one will be superstore. Means that they're selling many items, but the contribution margin per item is very small. But they don't rely on the selling one additional watermelon or one additional banana. They're relying on selling at thousands kilograms of bananas per day in order to generate operating income. So if they don't sell 3 kilograms bananas today, or sell 3 kilograms less bananas than yesterday, that's not going to hit them too much, or not going to hit them at all on their operating income. Because the 3 kilograms, the margin lost is very, very, very minimal. Where in this company most likely will be Louis Vuitton, means the contribution margin per bag that they're selling is ginormous. So if they don't make one additional sale, or if they lose one sale this month, they're going to have a huge impact on their operating income. But one additional bag sale, that's going to bring them ginormous contribution margin. Okay, let's take a break now. And let's go over the slides after the break. So I'm going to give you 10 minutes break, and at 10:52 or 10:55, we're going to go over the slides.
Hello, Professor.
Yes.
Can I ask you something?
Yes, please.
We have something religious program here, and I am there. Can I just leave the meeting?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cost volume profit relationship. What's interesting here? It's a powerful tool for the managers, which is you, to help you to understand the relationship and the interrelationship among cost, volume, profit in the organization by focusing of the how different things interact. Which are the different things? Is the price of the product first, level or volume of the sales or activities, variable cost per unit, fixed cost in total, and mix of products if we have a mixed products. So this company here, what they're doing is they're selling a product, selling bicycle for 200. Their current sales are $250,000 when they're selling 500 bicycle. So we can easily get from here cost, sales price per bicycle, variable cost per bicycle, fixed cost we already know stay the same. So what we can see here is we moving to the contribution margin format statement, which means the costs are divided only by behavior, variable and fixed. Contribution, we have the contribution margin, we have the fixed cost, we have the operating income. Operating income is always equal to the contribution margin minus the fixed cost, but contribution margin itself is equal to the sales minus the variable cost. Once we break it per unit, we're going to see that per unit, we generating sales price per unit is $500, and when we sell 500 units, that's why we're getting the sales. We also gonna get the variable cost per unit, and we're gonna get contribution margin per unit. From there, we can calculate the contribution margin ratio, which contribution margin ratio will be the same per unit and in total. That's not gonna change. And contribution margin ratio, we express it as a percentage of sales. So now each month, they need to generate at least the fixed cost in order to have the operating income. Otherwise, if they not reach the fixed cost, obviously they're gonna lose money. Now, what's gonna happen once we know that the fixed cost is 80,000? That means at the break even, they're not gonna make any income. That means if they're selling 400 units, they're gonna have enough contribution margin to cover the fixed cost, but that's not gonna leave them any operating income. But if they sell one additional unit after the break-even point, the contribution margin from that additional unit is gonna flow to our operating income. That means that's why it's important you to understand the contribution margin per unit, because every additional unit that you're selling, the contribution margin for that unit comes to your operating income. Now, if we know that the $400 units that we're selling is at the break even, what if we sell 430 bikes? That means 30 bikes above the break even. So that means from every bike, we're gonna generate $200 times 30 bikes. That's gonna give us $6,000 increase in our operating income, and we can easily see it if that's actually happen. Now, the other thing that we can do is to try to express all the cost relationship with the diagram. How we can get to that graph or diagram when we have a different units of level. We're gonna do the calculation for 300 units, for 400 units, for 500 units, and we're gonna follow the pattern of those. If we have to express it as a graph, that will be our graph. Again, fixed cost is always fixed cost. That's where we start. Every month, we start with the fixed cost. The sales hasn't started yet, but the fixed cost already started. And you already know it. You haven't started going to work, but you already paid the rent. Once you start working, the first objective is to cover the fixed cost. Once you cover the fixed cost, then you keep working to cover the variable cost. And when you reach this point, that will be the point that you come to the break even or you cover all the cost. After that point, you are on the gaining part or operating on the profit side. Anywhere below the break even, you're on the losing side. So this is your loss area below the break even. Profit area is above the break even. Now let's keep going with this graph and see how we're going to get the contribution margin ratio. We already said the total contribution margin divided by sales is going to give us contribution margins ratio. How we can interpret that ratio? For every dollar of sales, we're going to get only 40%. So that means for every dollar of sales, the company is going to get 40 cents. Now, can we get the contribution margin ratio per unit? Yes, we can. The same thing, contribution margin for 1 unit divided by sales price per 1 unit is going to give us exactly the same number. And since the only thing that we're changing is the number of units, so the both sales and the variable cost is going to go into the same relationship going up. So that contribution margin is never going to change. So let's do this question quickly. This coffee espresso stand downtown office building. The average selling price per cup of coffee is $1.49. and the average variable cost per coffee is 0.36. The average fixed expenses is 1,300. Currently, they're selling 2,100 cups. What's the contribution margin ratio for this company? What I can do is I can copy this and move to the Excel spreadsheet again. And once I move to the Excel spreadsheet again, I can paste it there and we can do it together very quickly. And to see what we're gonna get from this question. Just a second, because the formatting that I'm using is not correct. So just give me a second to get the right format. Still not the right format. For some reason, it's changing the everything. So I can use another thing here. Try to use the snipping tool. And flip it as a snipping tool. Okay, that's easy. And now I can move to the Excel spreadsheet, which I already have it open. And it's gonna be like here. So we have our question. So what we have to do, we have to get the contribution margin ratio. First, we have the sales price per unit. Sales price per unit is 149. Let's make it a little bit bigger so you can see it. It's 1.49. The variable cost per unit is 0.36, which is going to give us contribution margin. And that contribution margin, for in our case, will be equal to this one minus that one is going to be equal to 112. And we have the fixed cost, which fixed cost is 1,300 units, $1,300 in this case. So our contribution, that is 100%. Then that one will be equal to 36 divided by 148. That will be, as a percentage, will be 2432, and the other one will be equal to that one, which will be 7568, or as a number is gonna be 0.758, and that will be our answer here. Let's move back to the slides. So the correct answer here will be obviously 0.758. Now the key formulas for this chapter are the profit. I always need to know the profit. The profit is the number of units that we're selling, time contribution margin per unit, minus the fixed cost, is that's going to give us profit. Contribution margin is the sales minus the variable expenses. Contribution margin per unit is the sales per unit, price per unit minus the variable cost per unit. Contribution margin ratio, you can get it as the total contribution margin divided by total sales, or unit contribution margin divided by sales price per unit. Variable ratio is the variable expenses divided by sales. Those are the key formulas. So now again, the variable expense ratio, you can express it as a, once we have the variable expense divided by sales, or once we get that one, we're going to get the variable expense ratio, or we can express as 1 minus the contribution margin ratio is going to give you the variable expense ratio. Once we have the variable expense ratio, we can get the contribution margin ratio, either contribution margin divided by sales, either 1 divided by variable expense ratio. You can also get it that way. Now, what's going to happen if we change the fixed cost and the sales and volume? So what will be the impact profit of this company if they increase the sales from 500 to 540 by increase the monthly advertising budget by $10,000? Well, we already know that per unit they're generating $200. If they increase their sales with 40 units only, that's going to give us additional $8,000. But $8,000 is not going to be enough to cover the $10,000 advertising budget. So technically they're going to lose $2,000. So for that case, it's not advisable for them to go in that direction because they're going to lose $2,000 of that increase in the fixed expense. And this is the rationality of what they just said, because the increase in the contribution margin will be only $8,000, 40 units times 200, $8,000, but the fixed cost is going to jump with 10,000, so that means they lose $2,000. So, and then we're going to go to the different scenarios. What will be the impact if they use the high quality raw material, which that's going to increase the variable cost. Once they increase the variable cost, contribution margin per unit is going to change, but they increase the sales from 500 to 580 units. If that's happened, they generating operating income $10,200 more. So in that case, this combination works. The other combination will be what will be the impact on the profit if we cut the selling price with $20, increase advertising budget by $15,000 per month, and increase the sales. That is going to bring us increase of sales from 500 to 650 units. So 150 units. Is that justifiable? Well, we're going to generate additional income of $2,000. So in that case, that makes sense. So we can go for that one. Now, the other interesting point that I want you to see here is what is the profit impact if we're paying $15 sales commission per bike instead of $6,000 per month. So that sales commission per month, $15 per bike, increase the sales with 75 units. So how this going to impact our company? Well, in that case, the company, that's additional 75 bikes that we're selling, it's even though we're paying commission, but because we reduce the fixed cost with 6,000, we're making our fixed salary employee to work for the sales price, sales commission, which is in their benefit. So they have more incentive to work. And because of that, they are increasing not only the money that they're getting out, but also the operating income for the company. So that works in our interest, best interest, and in the best interest of the employees. So that's why it's important for you to understand the relationship between all those. What's going to happen if we change the regular selling price? So if the company has opportunity to sell 150 bikes to the wholesaler without distributing sales to the other customer or fixed expenses, what will be the quote price if we want to increase our profit with $3,000? So we can approach this case two ways. First, we want $3,000 and they want to purchase 150 bikes. Now we know the sales, we know if we want to make $3,000 out of 150 bikes. We know our fixed cost, our variable cost to produce the bike. That was $300 per bike. What that means, now our variable cost will be $45,000. So that means we, from those 150 bikes, we have to generate $48,000 in order to get $3,000. Once we get 48 divided by 300 by 150, we're going to get $320 per bike. The other option that we have is, since we want $3,000 in total for 150 bikes, that means we want to generate $200. Sorry, $20 per bike. Our variable cost is 300, so that means we have to sell the bike for $320. That's another way you to come up with the same number. Now for the break-even analysis, we have two ways to do it: equation method and formula method. Now the equation method is putting in mind that profit is always equal to sales minus the variable cost minus fixed cost. Or sales is equal to the variable cost plus the fixed cost plus the profit. If we want the profit to be zero or to be a break even, then the sales has to be equal to the variable cost plus the fixed cost. And then we're using that equation to come up with the different numbers. Now the first number is sales is equal to the variable cost plus the fixed cost plus the profit. Sales coming from the sales price per unit time number of units. Variable cost comes from the variable cost per unit time number of units. Fixed cost is fixed cost. We're solving the equation and come up with the number of units. That will be one way to do it. And that's how we come up with the 400 bikes with the break even. That method also can be modified based on the percentages. Once we know that the variable expense is 60% of the sales price, the question is how much should be the sales. And in that case, we're going to come up with the calculation that the sales should be $200,000 in order to be in break-even point. Now, the formal method is the one that we come up with the Excel spreadsheet. And in the formal method, again, we can express it by the number of units and sales. Fixed expense is always our nominator. Denominator is always contribution margin. But for the number of units, we need contribution margin per unit. For the sales, we need contribution margin as a percentage. And then we can easily express the sales. Sales should be equal to the fixed cost divided by contribution margin ratio. And for the number of units, will be contribution margin, fixed cost divided by contribution margin per unit. Now, in our case here, what will be the break-even in units of sales? Well, the break-even of units of sales, if we have to go back to our formula here, is we know our fixed cost, which fixed cost is equal to $1,300. Our contribution margin per unit is equal to 1.12. So then will be the number of units that we need to sell in order to get to the break-even is going to be 1,300 divided by contribution margin per unit is going to be roughly 1,161 units. So if we have to go back to our slides and see where we are, our contribution margin, the number of units that we need to sell is 1,150 units. There's the number that we're getting is, let's see, 1,160. That will be because what I made a mistake here. Let me see why we're deviating from the answer. 149. I'm or 148. It's 1.49. So my selling price was different. That's why that different calculation we're getting. But once I sell it, we're getting the same answer at 150 here. Justification of what I just said is once I change the selling price to 149, which was the equal, the one that is said in the question, number of units that we need to sell is 1,150 units, which is exactly the same that the slide shows you. 1,150 units. The next question will be, what is the break-even point in sales? So in order to get the break-even point in sales, what we need to do is to get the fixed cost. In this case, we need the fixed cost, which is the fixed cost again is still 1,300. 1,300, and we need contribution margin as a percentage in this case, which that contribution margin as a percentage is that much. So then our sales should be equal on the break-even point will be 1,300 divided by contribution margin ratio. $1,714 will be our break-even as a sales amount. Let's see what the slide says. In this case, we should be the same. $1,715. It will be our break-even point in our sales. Now, the target profit analysis is the target is when we want to achieve certain income above the break-even. So what we have to do is we have to add that one profit to our equation and run the calculation. That for the equation method. In the formal method, we're gonna add again, we're adding the target profit to the fixed cost in the numerator side. Once we do that, we're gonna get the number of units. Let's see, this company, they want to achieve the same, how many cups coffee they have to sell if to attain the target income of 2,500 per month. If that's the case, so if they want 2,500, what we have to do is we have to add the target 2,500 here, 2,500 here, and 2,500 here, and we can run the calculation and see how much will be our number of units that we need to sell to achieve that one. That will be equal to bracket 1,300 plus 2,500 divided by contribution margin per unit. In this case, we need to sell 3,362 cups or 363 cups, and our sales is going to be equal to achieve that income 1,300 plus 2,500 divided by contribution margin ratio, or our sales should be $5,011 in that case. So let's go back to our slides. So for the number of cups, obviously we need to sell 3,363 cups in order to achieve that target income of $2,500. Margin of safety. Margin of safety was where we are compared to the break-even point. If we currently have an operating income of $20,000 and we know that our break-even point is at 0, then we're comparing how many units we're selling we're selling currently 500. At the break-even, we're selling 400. That means we are 100 units above the break-even. So our margin of safety is 100 units. As a dollar amount, our sales are $50,000 more than the break-even point sales. So the 50,000, we can express it as a percentage. The difference divided by the current sales. So that means we're 20% higher than the break-even point in the margin of safety. As a number of bikes is 100 bikes more. So in this case, our company selling the espresso, the average price 2,100 cups are sold each month on average. What's the margin of safety? So if they're selling 2,100 cups, let's go back to our slide, Excel spreadsheet, and check where we were in our case. So if they're currently selling, if the current sales is 2,100 cups, and our margin of safety is, our break-even point is 1,150 cups. So that means our margin of safety is where we are minus the break-even. So we're 950 cups above the break-even, or the margin of safety 949. Also, as a percentage can be expressed this amount divided by that amount. It's 45% is our margin of safety at the current situation. So let's see if that's checked with our slides. What's the hour safety? 950 cups. And as a percentage is 45%. Now the cost structure of the company was the last one, which we're getting the leverage. The cost structure is first how the company relates or rely on the variable cost versus the fixed cost. So again, some company are heavily exposed on the variable cost. Some company are very heavily exposed on the fixed cost. Because of that, they're going to have a different company structure. What's the advantage if you are heavily exposed on the fixed cost? That means the variable costs are very small. That means one additional unit of sales is going to give you a huge operating income. What's the disadvantage? Disadvantage is if that happens, if you're losing sale of one unit, that will cause a huge decrease in your operating income. So that is expressed by the operating leverage. How are we going to get the operating leverage? Operating leverage, we're going to get it as a contribution margin divided by net operating income. In other words, how many times I have my contribution margin, my operating income in the contribution margin. Higher you have it, better for you. Lower you have it, it's not. So in this company, the contribution margin $100,000. Operating income is 20,000. So they have 5 times operating income into the contribution margin. What that means to them? That means that if they increase the sales with 10%, that's going to give them 50% increase in their operating income. So the percentage increase in sales times the operating leverage, it's going to give you the increase in the operating income. So let's see if that's actually checked. So our sales increase with 10% from 500 units to 550. That's 50 units. It's exactly 10%. Operating income increased from 250 to 275. That's 25%, a 25,000 increase. That's 10% increase. What's happened with the operating income? From 20,000 jump to 30,000. That's 10,000. That's 50% increase from where we are. So obviously that works. So let's see in our case, what's the operating leverage in our case when we're selling each month 2,100 cups. So what we have to do is we have to run some calculation here in order to get the number. Let me share the right screen here with you so we can see it. Sorry, not the one that I wanted. Let me try again. So currently we're selling 2,100 units. If we're selling 2,100 units, we have to run some calculation here for the sales price of these things. So let's get this one here. And let's change it that we're selling 2,100 units. So if we do that, our sales will gonna be equal to this one time that one. Then our variable cost will be 2010 times 0.36. So our contribution margin will be 2,373. That means our operating income is going to be equal to contribution margin minus the fixed cost. It's going to be 173. So in that case, our operating leverage is going to be equal to the contribution margin divided by operating income, and that number is 221. So I have my operating income in my contribution margin 2 times and 21. 221 times. So now the question is, what if the sales increase with the 10%? What will be the increase? If it increase with 20%, how much will be increased in our operating income? So let's go back to our slides. So the operating leverage in this case is 221. And the next question is, what's going to happen if sales increase with 20%? Well, 20% that time 221 is going to give us increase with 44.2%. And this is just justification of that. The last thing that happened that I want you to know is how we're going to deal with when we have mixed products. So if we have two products, for example, in our sales, in our mix, now the contribution margin per product in this case is irrelevant. What we have to do, we have to get the total. Once we get the total contribution margin, we can get the contribution margin ratio, and we calculating the contribution margin ratio based on the total numbers. Once we have the contribution margin ratio based on the total numbers, we can find now the break-even in sales as a sales dollar amount. Now, once we have the break-even, the sales dollars amount, we already know which product contribute how much to the sales in the company. So the first product sales contributes 45% of the total sales. The second product contributes 55% of the total sales. Once I calculate the sales that I need for the break-even, I have to get the 45% of that amount is going to come from the product one, and 45% of that amount is going to come to the product two. So again, I'm calculating the break-even based on the total contribution margin. My total sales should be 352,697 to achieve the break-even. But 45% of this amount have to come from the first product, and 55% of this amount have to come from the second product. That was the last thing that I wanted to show you today. And which are the assumptions that we, in order everything this to work, is first, sales price always stays the same. Second one, variable cost per units always stays the same. Costs are linear. That means variable costs behave as a variable cost. Per unit never changes. In total, increase with the number of units. Fixed cost always stays the same. It doesn't change. When we have the multiple products, sales mix doesn't change. The percentage of the sales doesn't change. And for the manufacturing companies, inventory doesn't change. So we always start with the zero inventory and finish with zero inventory. So whatever we produce, that's how much we sell. And that's our cost volume profit analysis chapter. Now questions.